Tyler Brennan had been in his first apartment for 6 days. 6 days of freedom. 6 days of finally being on his own. On September 14th, 2016, he decided to fix the broken lock on his door. The kind of small, responsible thing you do when you're 19 and trying to prove you can handle adulthood. He walked into Ironwood Hardware Depot at 3:47 p.m. His roommate reported him missing 2 days later. Here's what the cameras show. Tyler entering the store. Tyler climbing the stairs. Tyler walking into aisle 17, the lock section in the far back corner. Tyler reaching for a deadbolt. Here's what they don't show. Tyler leaving. 6 exits. 16 cameras. Hundreds of hours of footage. Police searched every inch of that 2-story building. They found his car in the parking lot. Keys still in the ignition. They found his phone pinging from somewhere inside the store. But Tyler Brennan? He was gone. Then they found the space behind the wall. The space that wasn't on any blueprint. And inside that space, they found something that made seasoned detectives go pale. 7 sets of clothing, decades old, and one word carved into the floor. Before we go further, hit that like button if you already know you're not sleeping tonight, and subscribe, because this gets so much worse. Tyler Brennan wasn't supposed to be in Spokane at all. He'd grown up in Tacoma, the youngest of 3 siblings, known for his quiet demeanor and tendency to blend into the background. After dropping out of community college in the spring of 2016, citing anxiety and an inability to focus, he drifted through a series of part-time jobs before finally deciding he needed a fresh start. Spokane seemed far enough from family expectations, but close enough to feel safe. In early September, he signed a lease on a studio apartment in the Hilliard neighborhood, a working-class area north of downtown, known for its vintage shops and railroad history. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse. It had drafty windows, uneven floorboards, and a door lock so worn that Tyler could wiggle it open without turning the key. On September 14th, he decided to fix that. He wasn't handy. His older brother had always been the one to handle repairs, but a lock seemed simple enough. He Googled best door locks for apartments, screenshotted a deadbolt model, and set out for the nearest hardware store. Ironwood Hardware Depot sat on East Sprague Avenue, a hulking 2-story building that had been a fixture of Spokane's industrial corridor since 1982. The exterior was all corrugated metal and faded signage, the kind of place that looked like it had survived decades through sheer stubbornness. Inside, the store was a labyrinth. The ground floor held lumber, gardening supplies, and automotive parts. The 2nd floor, accessible by a wide staircase near the center, housed electrical components, plumbing fixtures, and an entire section devoted to locks, keys, and home security. Tyler arrived just before 3:45 p.m. Surveillance footage from the parking lot shows him locking his car, a decade-old Honda Civic, and walking toward the entrance. He paused briefly to check his phone, then pushed through the double doors. The main entrance camera captured him clearly. Gray hoodie, jeans, white sneakers. He wasn't in a hurry. He moved like someone with time to kill. Inside, the store was moderately busy. A Wednesday afternoon meant a handful of contractors grabbing supplies, a few homeowners browsing paint colors, and retirees killing time in the tool section. Tyler bypassed the customer service desk and headed straight for the staircase. The 2nd floor camera shows him ascending at 3:49 p.m. He reached the top, glanced around as if getting his bearings, then walked toward the back left corner of the building. That's where the lock aisle was, aisle 17 to be exact, a narrow corridor lined with pegboards displaying padlocks, deadbolts, combination locks, and key blanks. It was one of the quietest sections of the store, far from the main staircase, tucked against the building's rear wall. The overhead lights buzzed faintly. There were no other customers visible in the frame. Tyler entered aisle 17 at 3:52 p.m. The camera angle, positioned at the aisle's entrance, showed him walking slowly, scanning the displays. He stopped about halfway down, pulled out his phone. presumably to check the screenshot of the lock he wanted, and reached for a package on the middle shelf. Then he stepped forward deeper into the aisle, moving out of the camera's view. He never came back. When Tyler's roommate, a 21-year-old line cook named Jordan Vasquez, reported him missing on September 16th, police treated it as routine. Young men disappear for a few days all the time, crashing with friends, chasing romantic interests, avoiding responsibilities. Jordan insisted this was different. Tyler had no close friends in Spokane yet. His phone went straight to voicemail. His car was still in the Ironwood hardware parking lot, exactly where he'd left it 2 days earlier. That detail changed everything. Spokane police detective Laura Finch was assigned to the case. A 12-year veteran with a reputation for thoroughness, Finch started by pulling surveillance footage from Ironwood hardware. The store's security system was extensive. 16 cameras covering entrances, exits, high-value merchandise areas, and the main staircase. Every camera recorded continuously, storing footage for 30 days before overwriting. Finch spent hours reviewing the afternoon of September 14th. She watched Tyler enter at 3:47 p.m. She watched him climb the stairs at 3:49 p.m. She watched him walk into aisle 17 at 3:52 p.m. Then she watched every exit camera for the next 6 hours. No Tyler. She expanded the window. Midnight. Dawn. The entire next day. Still nothing. She reviewed the second-floor camera positioned at the entrance to aisle 17. Between 3:52 p.m. and closing time at 8:00 p.m., 14 different customers entered that aisle. Some stayed for seconds. Others browsed for minutes. All of them left, except Tyler. Finch interviewed the staff who'd been working that day. 4 employees on the floor, 1 manager, 2 cashiers. None of them remembered seeing Tyler. The store had been busy enough that a lone customer in the lock aisle wouldn't stand out, but someone should have noticed if he'd collapsed, or if he'd tried to hide, or if he'd done anything unusual. The store manager, a 53-year-old man named Dale Pritchard, who'd worked at Ironwood for 18 years, was baffled. "We searched the whole building that night," he told Finch. "After you called, we walked every aisle, checked the bathrooms, the break room, the storage areas. There's nowhere to hide. And even if there was, why would he?" Finch didn't have an answer, but she did have a theory forming, one that made her stomach tighten. Tyler Brennan hadn't left the store, which meant he was still inside. On September 17th, Finch returned to Ironwood Hardware with 2 additional officers and a K-9 unit. The store was closed for the search. They started on the second floor, moving methodically through every aisle, every display, every corner. The search dog, a German shepherd trained in locating missing persons, showed no interest in aisle 17. It showed no interest in anything. They expanded to the first floor. Lumber stacks, gardening sheds on display, rows of paint cans. Nothing. They checked the employee break room, the manager's office, the janitor's closet. They climbed into the crawl space above the ceiling tiles, a dusty, cramped area used for electrical conduits and ventilation ducts. Still nothing. By late afternoon, Finch was standing in aisle 17, staring at the lock displays. This was where Tyler had been last seen. The camera showed him walking deeper into the aisle, but the angle didn't capture the far end. What was back there? She walked the length of the aisle herself. At the end, the space opened slightly. Enough room to turn around, but nothing more. The back wall was solid cinder block, painted the same industrial beige as the rest of the store. No doors, no windows, no vents large enough for a person. Finch pressed her palm against the wall. Solid. She knocked. Solid. She ran her fingers along the seams where the wall met the floor. Concrete. Undisturbed. "Detective?" One of the officers called from the staircase. "You need to see this." Finch walked over. The officer was holding a printout, a list of incident reports filed at Ironwood Hardware over the past 5 years. "Pritchard pulled this from their records," the officer explained. "Thought it might help." Finch scanned the list. Shoplifting attempts, customer disputes, a broken water pipe. Then, near the bottom, An entry from July 2014. Customer reported disoriented in second floor lock aisle. Paramedics called. Customer refused transport. Left store on foot. Who was the customer? Finch asked. The officer flipped to the next page. Name was Angela Horn, 41 years old. Address listed in Spokane Valley. Finch felt a chill. Did anyone follow up? No reason to. She left on her own. Finch looked back toward aisle 17. Find her, she said quietly. I want to know what happened that day. Angela Horn lived in a modest, split-level home in Spokane Valley, about 20 minutes from Ironwood Hardware. When Detective Finch knocked on her door on the morning of September 18th, Angela answered with a cautious smile, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was a middle school art teacher, married, mother of 2. She looked nothing like someone who'd been involved in a mysterious incident, until Finch mentioned aisle 17. Angela's expression changed. The smile vanished. She stepped back, one hand gripping the doorframe. I don't go to that store anymore, she said softly. Finch explained why she was there. Tyler Brennan, the missing footage, the impossible disappearance. Angela listened, then nodded slowly. You should come inside. They sat in Angela's living room, sunlight streaming through the windows. Angela's hands trembled as she spoke. It was July 2014, she began. I'd gone to Ironwood to buy a new lock for my garden shed. I went upstairs, walked to the lock aisle. It's in the back, you know. And I started looking at the options. Finch leaned forward. What happened? I felt strange, like the air got thicker. I remember looking down the aisle and it seemed longer than it should have been, like the perspective was wrong. I thought maybe I was dehydrated or something, so I turned to leave. Did you leave? Angela shook her head. I couldn't. I took a step back toward the entrance of the aisle, but I didn't get any closer. It was like I was walking in place. I could see the rest of the store, people walking by, going about their business, but I couldn't reach them. Finch's pulse quickened. How long did this last? I don't know. Minutes. It felt like hours. I started panicking, calling for help, but no one heard me. Then suddenly, I was at the front of the aisle again, just standing there. An employee asked if I was okay. I told him I felt dizzy, and he called paramedics, but I didn't let them take me. I just wanted to leave. Did you ever go back? Never. And I don't talk about it because people would think I'm crazy. Finch made notes. Did you notice anything unusual about the aisle itself? Any sounds, smells, changes in temperature? Angela thought for a moment. The lights. They weren't flickering, but they felt dimmer, like I was seeing through a filter. And it was quiet. Too quiet. I could hear my heartbeat, but nothing else. Finch left Angela's house with more questions than answers. Back at the station, she ran a deeper search of Ironwood Hardware's history, building permits, business licenses, incident reports. She found something buried in a Spokane news archive from 1989, a brief article about a construction accident during a store renovation. A worker had fallen from scaffolding on the second floor, near what would later become the lock aisle. He'd survived, but quit the job. No further details. Finch called the local historical society. They had records of the building's past. Before Ironwood Hardware, the structure had been a textile warehouse in the 1960s. Before that, a grain storage facility. And before that, going back to the 1930s, it had been the site of a small boarding house that burned down under suspicious circumstances. No casualties were officially recorded, but rumors persisted that someone had been trapped inside. Finch stared at her notes. A boarding house fire, a construction accident, a customer who couldn't escape an aisle, and now, Tyler Brennan. She returned to Ironwood Hardware on September 19th, this time with a structural engineer. They examined aisle 17 in detail. The engineer measured the space, checked for hollow walls, scanned for hidden voids. Everything was solid. The aisle was exactly what it appeared to be, a narrow corridor with pegboard walls and a concrete floor. But when the engineer checked the building's blueprints, something didn't match. According to the original plans, the second floor should have been slightly larger. The back wall of aisle 17 was positioned about 3 feet forward from where it should have been. "Is there a space behind this wall?" Finch asked. The engineer nodded. "Technically, yes. But it's not accessible, no doors, no entry points. Could be a sealed-off area from an old renovation." Finch made a decision. "Open it." Dale Pritchard, the store manager, was reluctant to authorize demolition. "This is a working business," he protested. "We can't just start tearing down walls because of a missing person case." Finch obtained a warrant. On September 21st, a crew arrived at Ironwood Hardware with sledgehammers and power tools. They cordoned off aisle 17 and began carefully removing sections of the back wall. The cinder block came away easily, too easily. Behind it, instead of solid foundation, they found a hollow space. It was narrow, perhaps 2 feet deep and 8 feet wide. The floor was bare concrete. The walls were unfinished. And in the center of the space, resting against the far wall, was a backpack. Finch pulled on gloves and retrieved it. The backpack was black, worn, covered in dust. Inside, she found a wallet. The ID belonged to Tyler Brennan. But Tyler wasn't there. The hidden space was empty. No body, no signs of struggle, just the backpack, as if someone had carefully placed it there and walked away. Finch checked the wallet. Tyler's driver's license, a debit card, $12 in cash, and a receipt from a coffee shop dated September 14th, 2016, the day he vanished. "Where is he?" one of the officers muttered. Finch examined the space more closely. The walls were smooth, no markings, no graffiti. The floor was undisturbed, but along the base of the far wall she noticed something, a faint seam, almost imperceptible. She ran her fingers along it. The wall shifted slightly. "There's another layer," she said. The crew resumed work, this time more carefully. They removed the false wall section by section. Behind it, they found a second hidden space, this one larger, maybe 6 feet deep. And in that space, they found something that made Finch's blood run cold. Clothing, arranged in neat piles. A woman's jacket, a man's work boots, a child's sneakers. And underneath the clothing, scratched into the concrete floor in jagged, desperate letters, a single word: waiting. Finch stepped back. "How many piles?" one of the officers counted. 7. 7 sets of clothing, 7 people, and none of them were Tyler Brennan. Finch ordered the scene processed. Forensic teams moved in, photographing, cataloging, collecting DNA samples. The clothing spanned decades, styles from the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s. Some pieces were so deteriorated they fell apart when touched, but none of the items matched Tyler's description of what he'd been wearing. That night, Finch couldn't sleep. She sat in her office, reviewing everything. Tyler walks into aisle 17. He disappears. His backpack appears in a hidden space that shouldn't exist. But where is Tyler? And who left those clothes? She pulled up missing person reports for Spokane County going back 50 years. She cross-referenced them with Ironwood Hardware's location. 7 names emerged. People who'd vanished near East Sprague Avenue between 1973 and 2012. None of the cases had been solved. Finch felt the pieces shifting, but they still didn't fit. The hidden space wasn't large enough to hold bodies. There was no evidence of violence. And the word, waiting, what did it mean? On September 24th, forensic results came back. DNA extracted from the clothing matched 4 of the missing persons on Finch's list. The other 3 items were too degraded for analysis. But one detail stood out. Fibers found on the clothing contained traces of a chemical compound consistent with old building materials, specifically materials used in structures built before 1950. Finch returned to the Historical Society. she dug deeper into the boarding house that had burned down in the 1930s. She found a single newspaper clipping from 1936, buried in the archives. It described the fire as accidental, caused by a faulty furnace. But the article mentioned one strange detail: a tenant named Harold Voss, a 43-year-old drifter who'd been staying in a basement room. His body was never found. The boarding house had been built on the exact spot where Ironwood Hardware now stood. Detective Finch contacted a paranormal research team, not because she believed in ghosts, but because she'd exhausted rational explanations. The team, led by a physicist named Dr. Elaine Sorrell, who specialized in spatial anomalies, arrived on September 27th. Dr. Sorrell's theory was grounded in science, not superstition. Certain locations, she explained, can develop what we call thin spots, areas where the physical properties of space become unstable. It's rare, usually tied to geological stress, underground water sources, or electromagnetic interference. Sometimes, structures built on these spots can amplify the effect. She set up equipment in aisle 17, electromagnetic sensors, thermal cameras, laser distance measurers. The readings were bizarre. The temperature in the aisle fluctuated wildly, dropping 10 degrees in seconds, then spiking back up. Electromagnetic fields pulsed in irregular patterns, and the laser measurements showed something impossible. The distance from the front of the aisle to the back wall changed depending on where you stood. "It's like the space is folding," Dr. Sorrell said, staring at her equipment, "or overlapping with somewhere else." Finch watched as Dr. Sorrell placed a marked ball at the far end of the aisle and rolled it forward. The ball moved normally for several feet, then seemed to slow, as if pushing through syrup. It stopped about 2 feet from the camera's view, even though the aisle wasn't that long. "What happens if someone walks back there?" Finch asked. "I don't know," Dr. Sorrell admitted. "But based on these readings, I'd guess they'd experience severe spatial disorientation. Time might feel distorted. They might perceive exits that aren't really there, and if the anomaly is strong enough, they could end up displaced, trapped in a pocket of space that doesn't fully exist in our dimension." Finch thought of Angela Horn's description: walking but not moving, seeing the store but not reaching it. "Can we reverse it?" Finch asked. "Bring someone back?" Dr. Sorrell hesitated. "Theoretically, yes. If we could stabilize the anomaly, we might create a window, but it would require precise timing and conditions we don't fully understand." Finch made a decision. "Do it." Over the next 3 days, Dr. Sorrell's team worked to stabilize the spatial readings in aisle 17. They used electromagnetic dampeners, adjusted lighting to specific wavelengths, and even brought in industrial fans to alter air pressure. On October 1st, the readings finally aligned, a brief window where the space measured correctly, consistently, without fluctuation. Finch stood at the entrance to the aisle. "Now what?" Dr. Sorrell checked her monitors. "Now we wait." They didn't have to wait long. At 3:52 p.m., exactly the same time Tyler had disappeared 2 weeks earlier, something changed. The air in aisle 17 shimmered like heat rising from pavement. Then, slowly, a figure materialized at the far end. It was Tyler Brennan. He looked confused, disoriented, but physically unharmed. He stumbled forward, blinking against the fluorescent lights. 2 officers rushed in and guided him out of the aisle. The moment Tyler crossed the threshold, the shimmering stopped. Dr. Sorrell's equipment went haywire, then fell silent. Tyler was taken to Sacred Heart Medical Center for evaluation. Physically, he was fine. Dehydrated, exhausted, but otherwise healthy. Mentally, he was fragmented. He remembered walking into the aisle. He remembered looking at locks. Then, nothing. Just darkness and a sensation of waiting. No sense of time passing. No awareness of where he was. "How long was I gone?" he asked Finch. 17 days, she said gently. Tyler's face went pale. It felt like minutes. Tyler Brennan left Spokane 3 weeks later. He moved back to Tacoma, stayed with family, and refused all media requests. Detective Finch closed the case officially, but she never stopped thinking about Aisle 17. Dr. Sorrell published her findings in an obscure physics journal. Her conclusion: certain locations can develop transient spatial instabilities, creating zones where the normal flow of time and space breaks down. These zones are unpredictable, dangerous, and poorly understood. Her recommendation was simple: seal the area permanently. Ironwood Hardware Depot closed in November 2016. The building was sold to a developer who planned to convert it into loft apartments. But during renovation, workers refused to enter the second floor. They reported feeling disoriented, hearing voices, seeing shadows that moved without source. The project was abandoned. As of 2025, the building still stands, vacant and fenced off. The city has declared it structurally unsafe, though no official inspection has ever found anything wrong. Locals avoid it. Legends have grown. Stories of people who wander too close and hear whispers, or see figures in the windows. Detective Finch visited the site one last time in 2018. She stood outside, staring up at the second floor windows. She thought about the 7 sets of clothing, the word waiting carved into concrete, and the impossibly long corridor that shouldn't exist. She thought about Harold Voss, the man who vanished in the boarding house fire almost 90 years ago, whose body was never found. And she thought about Tyler Brennan, who spent 17 days in a space outside time, waiting in the dark for a door that might never open. Some places, Finch realized, don't follow the rules. They exist in the cracks, between what was and what is, between here and somewhere else. And sometimes those cracks open wide enough to swallow a person whole. Tyler was lucky. He found his way back. But standing there, looking at the empty building, Finch couldn't shake one final chilling thought. How many others are still waiting inside?